When you know how much you are loved by God, it does not matter what other people think. Sadly, one reason why as parents shouldn't be worried about people pleasing other people, rather it's the church folk or people in your family. People are gonna have their opinions on how they think you should raise your kids. As far as rather it's like it could be they can be like, oh, you shouldn't go to that church but go to this church, or you shouldn't take them to that school but you should have to this, or hey, you shouldn't let them eat that but you should have them eat this. There's gonna be people that's gonna have their own little opinions on how you should parent your kids. If as long as you are raising them uh, to know between right and wrong, as long as you're taking care of them, feeding them, clothing them, having them bathe, having them learn to take care of themselves, teaching them to respect authority, um, teach them say please. As long as you're supposed to do what people are, should know to do, common sense stuff. As long as you're doing what you need to do as your parent, you should not worry about what other people say. Most importantly, if you are training them to know the Lord and stuff, as long as and listen, with me saying that, people that are not Christian, I'm not saying that they're um, being immoral or whatever for not teaching their kids about the Lord. It does happen and it's sad, but some we shouldn't look down on families like that because they can change. But or their children, might decide to follow the Lord later, or the parents might decide to follow the Lord later. We can't judge them because we don't know what their future is. Okay? And plus, just because they're not Christian doesn't mean they don't know anything about morality. In fact, there's plenty of people who are not Christian or that believe in God at all, that that holds some morality. Okay, that knows the common sense stuff, like that it's wrong to steal, wrong to kill, wrong to do adultery, and things like that. Okay, but again, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing as a parent, and if you're a Christian, and most importantly, if you're teaching about God and help them understand who He is, you honestly should not, stress about what other people are saying about you and your kids, because they are your kids. You know them best. They don't. And you especially should not take advice or listen to people who have never been parents in their entire existence. I'm sorry, but if someone comes up to you and say, well, I've done a lot of babysitting, sweet. Babysitting a child and raising one are two different things. So especially when it comes to people who have never been parents at all, you should take their word as a grain of salt. So, like, for example, if you say you don't want your kids to eat a whole lot of candy and you want to encourage them to eat more healthy food, do that. Or if you're a parent that don't mind giving your kid candy every once in a while, someone's telling you, oh, you shouldn't do that because of all the sugar. Again, you're the parent. As long as you got the balance there, as long as you're teaching them to be healthy, as long as, as long as you don't take things too far on either way, again, why should you be concerned about what other people think? So, again, do not let other people run how you should parent your child. As long as you're doing what you need to do as a parent, that's all they need to know. And And especially, again, if it's someone that's never been a parent their entire lives, they have no right to tell you how you should, parent your child. Okay, moving on to the second person that they talk to. It's in the video called The Effective Habits to Embrace in Parenting. And again, that's with Focus on the Family. And it was talking to Dr. Randy. One of his quotes I wrote down was effective parent is a leader. And he talked about effective parents wants to influence the hearts of their child. And with that, he talked about Proverbs chapter 4. And he says, instead of always focusing on what the child is doing wrong, try to focus on what the child is doing right and encourage that. And say phrases like, I will love you even more tomorrow than I do today. I will love you no matter what. I am proud of you. And talked about the parable of the talents and how it can be applied to children, talking about their talents and their abilities, and to encourage them to work on to work and to focus on their talents and their abilities. Now, going back to with him saying I love you more and stuff, I mean, I believe it's James 2 where it talks about the power of the tongue. You can build your child up or you can build your child down. And the problem with a lot of parents that are perfectionists is that if their child just messes up a little bit, they not only do they point out their mistake, but they'll call them stupid, idiot, useless, all this kind of stuff. I mean, they'll get verbally abusive just to put the child down. And somehow they think in their mind that if they bully the child, they'll inspire the child to want to get better. But what they don't realize is that even if the child does try to do better, it's not because it's not because all of a sudden they have confidence in themselves. It's just because they don't want to disappoint you in it, and throughout time, they will resent you. They will resent you, whether they show it or not. They will get to the point to where they just had enough. And they'll say, you know what, I'm done. And even if you do convince a child to do better because you're bullying them, in the long run, you're just causing them more harm than good. And it's better to encourage your child by telling them that you have faith in them and that you believe in them rather than tear them down. I mean, it's kind of like a scenario, with a boss and his coworkers. If all a boss ever does is be a total jerk to his coworkers and bully them, he's not gonna get the results that he wants as far as production goes. But if he uplifts them, gives them compliments, encourages them, they work much better for him than they ever have before. Because whether you're a child or an adult, people like being believed in. They like someone having their back and having trust in them that they can be successful, that they have worth, that they have something to give, and that they're capable of doing things, of accomplishing, whatever they want to accomplish. If you really want to help your child climb up the ladder, you do so by encouraging them. You do not do it by tearing them down. And also, tearing them down could have the complete opposite effect. They might just give up. They might just turn around and give up and say, what's the point? Because no matter what I do, I'm never going to be successful. See, that's the thing that I find is quite dangerous that's going on within schools these days, is that they don't even trust kids to know what 2 plus 2 is. I mean, they're telling, these kids that they have absolutely no faith in them to succeed, that they gotta dumb things down because they have absolutely no faith that those kids are smart enough to understand anything. And it's sad. It's sad. It's depressing, and it's just flat out wrong. And listen, I'm not talking about within a specific ethnicity. I'm just talking about generally as a whole. Children, no matter what ethnicity they are capable. They are smart. They can understand. They just need people to have faith in them for that. And even when they do make mistakes, that's where they need good, loving teachers that be more concerned about help them understand basic math and language arts rather than what their personal life style is. Okay, but anyway, Dr. Randy talked about the 4 R's, which is relationship. The stronger our relationship is with Jesus Christ, the more we want to follow him and his word. The weaker our relationship is with him, the less that we care. The same goes for parents and children. Now, that goes along with another note I wrote based off a quote, which is what he said, which is rules without a relationship leads to rebellion. And talking about also that if you have a good relationship with your parents, it's easier for you to want to listen to your parents and respect their house rules. All of that is true because I had such a strong relationship with my parents. I honestly did not mind the rules of the house too much. It really wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, don't get me wrong, I wasn't perfect and I didn't follow everything all the time. In fact, where I lacked was keeping my room clean. But as far as helping them clean the house, doing dishes and doing homework and stuff like that, for the most part, I never complained about that, and I just follow the rules because I had that strong bond with them and I respected them. And going back to Kay, because her relationship with her parents was so strained and with such chaos, she ended up rebelling against them later. So that is very true. Having a relationship with your child makes a major difference as far as them wanting to listen to you and respecting you goes. But it does make a major difference. Okay. The second R is routines. And along with that, talk about routines of prayer time, meal time, making a family day, making a special day between you and your child. He talked about avoiding the C's, which are complaints, criticism, correction, and condemnation. Now, I kind of don't agree with him when it comes to correction because as parents, we should correct our children. I think what would be better said is to not overcorrect. But anyway. And also, when he talked about applying the rules, he said to begin with the question, will you please? Like, for example, say that your kid leaves a bunch of toys all over the floor. You start with, will you please pick those toys up? And if a child refuses to listen, then you say it's either or. Say, either pick those toys up or they can go in timeout. And if they still refuse to listen, then he says to say that you decided to. So you decided to go in the corner since you didn't want to pick up your toys. So his entire point on this is that you put the full responsibility on the child. And he said, do not use a pronoun I when you do this. Just put the full responsibility on the child. And with this, he talked about the grandma's law, which is when you, then you, not if. And like I said, the phrases like that puts the responsibility on the child. He also talked about having positive humor in a relationship with the family, which, as I said earlier with my own family, we'd pull pranks on each other, we'd pour water on each other, we'd play card games, um, all kinds of stuff. And humor does help quite a lot. It makes a big, tremendous difference. And laughter is good for the soul. Laughter just somehow takes stress off you and your family and everything. It's just good just to have that moment where you guys could just kick back, relax, and just laugh. It also makes very great memories. The last thing I wrote down they talked about was the A's, which are affection, attention, and appreciation. One last thing I forgot to mention is that sometimes as parents, you do need to allow your child to make mistakes. Because listen, one thing I tell my kids is that when they get stressed with their schoolwork, I tell them it's okay to make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from it. It's okay if you mess up. Just learn from it. And I also try to remind them of the words from a movie called Pistol Pack and Paula. If you haven't seen it, it is a cute little family movie. But I really love one specific line that she says throughout the entire movie. And it's actually quite true. And what she says a lot is the sure way to succeed is to keep on trying, but the sure way to fail is to not try at all. And that's one of the things that I use as a tool, so to speak, with my kids, and I say that to them sometimes when they're stressed with themselves. Saying, "Oh, I can't do this." You can, and I also remind them as far as again when they're doing a schoolwork, say if they're struggling on a math problem or something. I would tell them, listen, you are smart enough to understand this. You just have to, think it through. You just got to think it through. Just take a minute and just try to think it through. Because one important lesson you can teach your child early on is talking about the brain and how it grows. And how it grows is by challenging your brain with new and harder questions. They're never going to learn if you give them the answers all the time. You have to let them come up, think of the answer on their own. And again, even if they mess up, make mistakes, and get it wrong, again, the important part is to learn from it. You want your kids to understand that it's okay to make mistakes sometimes. That it's not really, that big of a deal if they do. It's part of life. It's part of growing up. It's part of learning. You don't want them to stress out again and make them feel like they have to be a perfectionist because they can't. It doesn't matter how hard they would try it. They're not going to be perfect. And you have to help them understand that God loves them despite their imperfections. And God is capable of working with us in our imperfections. Just take David, for example. When David faced Goliath, a whole bunch of people laughed at him because he was a very young man. Some believe he was a child, some believe he was a teenager, but either way, in comparison, he was a small person. And because he was small, that was, to the world's eyes, his imperfection. But God used him to defeat Goliath, despite the fact that David was a small, young, much younger person than Goliath. There's a, I can't pronounce his last name, but there's a man named Nick who was born without limbs. People definitely say that he's not perfect, but God uses him to preach to many people. God makes us special in our own way. We all have a uniqueness to us that God can use for His glory and for His kingdom. So, again, with parenting, you don't want to be too lenient, but you don't also want to be way too harsh. You don't want to be abusive, and you don't want to be negligent. It's honestly pretty much common sense on how we need to be with our kids. Sometimes we can use some pointers from people like Focus on the Family or whatever, help us to see certain things we haven't seen before. But we really need to get back in making parents again for children, because they need it. The children need it, the teenagers need it, our society needs it. We cannot keep letting things go as they are right now, because there's just a lot of rebellion. And a lot of it is stemming from parents who either were way too lenient and negligent, or parents who were just way too harsh. But the thing is, even so, even that's going on, God could still save them. He can still save those families. He can still save, those children that are in the rebellious stage right now. It's not too late for them. It's not too late to turn things around. It'll be harder for you, but it's not impossible. With God, all things are possible. May God help us. May God help our youth. Shalom.